And welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. My name is Breezy, and we're going to go down the rabbit hole. So, this is the sister podcast to Dark Academia Queen, Just a Breezy Chat, Sassy Southern Belle, and True Crime Lounge. I do have only five. I don't have that many. But I think podcast is my way of dealing, not having to associate with people, which is kind of ironic given that I have literally guests on it from time to time. But anyway, if you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please hit that subscribe button, help a girl out. Today we're going to be talking about the town of Centralia. Okay, how many of you remember the movie Silent Hill? Okay, so basically there's rumor that this movie is based off this town and all that. Yada yada yada. Well, what do we know about Centralia, Pennsylvania? Well, we know it used to be home to over 1,000 residents, and as of 2017, it had five. So, but the town isn't actually haunted by any members by murder or massacre. Even its acquisition from the indigenous population was a peaceful by the American standards. Now, Centralia, though, however, now is nearly abandoned and its nicknamed Hell on Earth for one reason. The whole town is on fire and has been for 59 years. In May 1962, a local firefighter was hired to clean up the town dump as they always had by setting it on fire. Now, except that this time the fire didn't go out and a passage beneath the dump connected the labyrinthine network of coal mines beneath the town. So, the fire was spread and of course fueled with immeasurable quantities of natural gas in the tunnels, and which burned and burned, and it took over 30 years for the majority of the Centralia residents to evacuate the city as sinkholes, open flames, and toxic gas clouds slowly engulfed the town, leaving its fuming wasteland to this very day. Now, what do we know? Where is Centralia? Well, we know it's a borough and it's a ghost town in Columbia County. It is in eastern northeast. It is in northeastern Pennsylvania. It has a major population decline. And everything. So, and we also know that it's completely surrounded by the Cunningham Township. So, so what about the early history of this town? Because believe it or not, this town was not always on fire. Well, many Native American tribes, what is now Columbia County, sold the land that makes up Centralia to colonial agents in 1749 for 500 pounds and 1770. During the construction of the Reading Road, what which stretched from the Reading to Fort Augusta. Settlers surveyed and explored the land, and a large portion of the Reading Road was developed later as Route 61, the main east highway in South Centralia. South Centralia. So, in 1793, Robert Morris, and he was a hero of the Revolutionary War and a very signatory of the Declaration of Independence, who acquired a third of the valley land. And when he declared bankruptcy in 1798, he surrendered the land over to the Bank of the U.S. So, a French sea captain named Stephen Girard would purchase um, Morris's land for $30,000, including 68 tracts east of Morris, and he had also learned that there were many antiquated coal in the region. So, yeah, I just adjusted my pillow so I can lean back on my bed. But anyway, the Centralia coal deposits were largely overlooked before the construction of the Mine Runs Railroad in 1854. So in 1882, Jonathan Frost would open up the Bull's Head Tavern in what we now call the Worring Creek Township. In this town, in this gave the town its first name, Bull's Head. Imagine saying that. Oh, we're from Bull's Head. Well, yeah. In 1842, Centralia's land was bought by Locust Mountain Coal and Iron Company Alexander Ray, who was a mining engineer who moved his family and began planning a village, laying out streets and lots for development. Now, Ray would name the town Centerville, but in 1865 named it Centralia because of the U.S. Post Office already had a Centerville and Schuylkill County. And the railroads ran in 1854 and it would transport coal out of the valley. So, what happens when the mining actually began? Well, two mines in Centralia opened in 1856, the Locust Run Mine and the Coleridge Mine. And afterward came the Hazeldale Colliery Mine in 1860, the Centralia Mine in 1862, and the Continental Mine in 1863. So, the Continental mine was located on Stephen Gerard's former estate, branching from the Lehigh Valley Road, in the Lehigh and Mahoney Railroad, constructed to Centralia in 1865, and it enabled transport and expansion of Centralia's coal sales to markets in the eastern Pennsylvania. So, Centralia was incorporated as a borough in 1866, and its principal employer was the aristocratic coal industry Alexander Ray, and the town's founder. Now, he was murdered in a buggy by members of the Molly McGraths on October 17, 1868, during a trip between Centralia and Mount Carmel. So, three men were eventually convicted of his death, and they were hanged in the county seat in Bloomsburg on March 25th, 1878. So, several other murders and incidents in arson also took place during the violence of Centralia that halted of the Molly McGrath's activity during the 1860s to organize mine workers' union in order to improve wages and working conditions in a legend among locals in Centralia tells that the Father Daniel Ignatius McDormand, who was the first Roman Catholic priest to call Centralia home, by the way, would curse the land in retaliation for being assaulted by three members of the McGraths in 1869. Now, McDormand would also say that there would be at least a day in the St. Ignatius Roman Catholic Church will be the only structure in the remaining in Centralia, and many of the Molly McGraw leaders were hanged in 1877, ending their crimes. Now, legend says that there's like a number of descendants from this group right here that still live in Centralia up until the 1980s. So, according to like the numbers of like a federal census, the town reached its maximum population in 1890. And at its peak, the town had like seven churches, like five hotels, 27 saloons, two theaters, a bank, and a post office, and 14 general and local grocery stores. Like 37 years later, the production of aristocrat coal had reached its peak in Pennsylvania. So in the following years, but the production would decline eventually because it can't all stay gold forever, right? So, as many young miners from Centralia had enlisted the military when the U.S. entered World War One, the Wall Street crash of 1922 will result in the Lehigh Valley Coal Valley Company closing five of its Centralia local mines. Bootleg miners continue mining in several idle mines using techniques such as something called like a pillar robbing. And this is basically like when miners would extract coal from coal pillars left in the mines to support their roofs, and this would cause a collapse in many idle mines, further complicating preventions of mine fire. In 1962, and efforts to sell off the abandoned mines um, ran into a collapsed areas. So by 19 in 1950, the Centralia Council would acquire the rights to the coal beneath Centralia and pass like state laws in 1949 that enabled the transaction. In that year, the federal census counted about 2,000 residents, give or take, in Centralia. So, coal mining continued in there until the 1960s, where most of the companies shut down. Bootleg mining still continued until 1982, and strip and open pit mining are still active in the area. Now, an underground mine about 3 miles west employs about 40 people. So, what about the area showing road conditions before the mine fire? Well, the service ended in 1966. Centralia operated in its own school district, including an elementary school and a high school. There were also two Catholic Portugal schools, Portugal schools, and by 1980, it had about 10,000 residents, give or take. About 500 or 600 lived nearby. So let's go now. Let's talk about the mine fires now. So, a small part of Centralia's mine fire, as it appeared after being exposed during an evacuation in 1969. What were the triggers of this fire? Well, the triggers would be. Now, here's the thing about the triggers. There are many people who disagree about what specifically caused this fire. Well, David de Kock was an author of The Fire Underground, the ongoing tragedy of Centralia Fire Mine, and he concluded that it started with an attempt to clean up the town's landfill. In May 1962, the Centralia Borough Council had 5 members to volunteer to fire company to clean up the town's landfill, located in an abandoned strip mine that also pit next to Oddfellow Cemetery, just outside the borough limits. Now, this was done prior to Memorial Day in the previous years when the landfill was at a different location. So, on May 27, 1962, the firefighters, as they had in their past, set the dump on fire, let it burn for some time, and unlike previous years, the fire was not fully extinguished. An unseated opening in the pit allowed the fire to enter the labyrinth and are in abandoned coal mines beneath Centralia. Now this Now, another source claims that the fire had started the previous day when the trash hauler dumped hot ash of coal discarded from there into an open trash pit. And the author in the Day Cave noted that the Borough Council's minutes from June 4th, 1962 referred to 2 fires at the dump, and the 5 firefighters had submitted bills for fighting the fire of a landfill. The borough, by law, was responsible for installing a fire-resistant clay barrier between each layer of the landfill, but they fell behind schedule, leaving the barrier incomplete. This also allowed the hot coal to kind of like penetrate and seam underneath, and everything. And it would go to and this would eventually lead to the fire. But now here's another theory, and this is that the fast colonial fire in 1932 was never fully extinguished, and that the fire reached its landfill by 1962. However, miners named Frank Jorgel Sr. disputes that theory. He also claims that he operated a bootleg mine with his brother near the landfill from 1960 to 1962. So, if this had not been extinguished, the brothers would most likely have overcome or killed by the noxious gas via many interconnected tunnels in the area. What about the immediate effects? Now, you're probably wondering, there's had to be some immediate actions taken, right? Well, in 1979, the locals became aware of the scale of the problem when a gas station owner and then Mayor John Coddington, inserted a dipstick into one of his underground tanks to check the fuel level. When he withdrew it, it seemed very hot. He lowered the thermometer into the tank, and a string was shocked to discover that the temperature in gasoline was 172 degrees like Fahrenheit. So, statewide attention to this fire would increase, culminating on February 14, 1981, when a 12-year-old resident named Tom Demosky fell into a sinkhole 4 feet that suddenly opened beneath the feet of his grandma's backyard, but saved himself by climbing to a tree root. His cousin, 14-year-old Eric Wolfgang, sorry, I love that name, would pull him out of the hole, and the plum of the hot steam billowing from the hole was tested and that he found contained lethal levels of carbon monoxide. At the time of the sinkhole collapse, the U.S. Representative James Nelligan and Governor Dick Thornburg was visiting the town to assess the area. So, although there were many physical and visible evidence of the fire, the residents were bitterly divided over whether or not they should posed a threat to them. Well, in the real disaster is above ground. Um, Steve Cole Smith and Steve Couch identified at least 6 community groups, each organized varying interrupting the amount and kind of risk by the fire. Excuse me. So, in 1983, U.S. Congress would allocate more than $42 million for relocation efforts. Excuse me. Now, nearly all the residents accepted the government's buyout offers. More than 1,000 moved out of the town, and 500 structures were demolished. By 1990, the census recorded 63 remaining residents. In 1992, however, Pennsylvania Governor Bob Casey invoked an eminent domain on the property and the borough, condemning that all the buildings within, and subsequent legal efforts by residents to overturn the action failed. In 2002, the U.S. Postal discontinued Centralia's zip code, and only 16 homes were still standing in 2006, which was reduced to 11 by 2009, when Governor Ed Rendell began the formal eviction of the remaining Centralia residents. Only 5 homes remained by 2010. So, the Centralia mine extended the beneath the village to Burnsville, a short distance to the south, and it required it also be abandoned. So, then there's list who condemns and condemnation and abandonment. In a semi-detached house that was separated from its attached neighborhood, and with 5 buttresses was being used to support. A shared wall of an attached house was removed, and an unbuttressed side of a similar house on the otherwise deserted street was a single streetlight and a utility pole. So there have been they also separated duplexes. They brick buttresses were added to support the shared wall in the removal and the attached home. And the unbuttressed side of the similar home on the other side was deserted. There are a few houses that remain in Centralia today, but most of the abandoned buildings have been demolished in Columbia County. And at a casual glance, the area now appears to be a field in which is paved streets just running through it. So some areas are being filled with new growth forests. The remaining church in the borough, St. Mary's, holds a weekly service on Sunday. And it has not been directly affected by the fires. The town has 4 cemeteries, including one on the hilltop, which has smoke rising around it and out of it. Has maintained in good condition. The only indication of the fire, which underlies some 400 acres, spreading along 4 fronts, or low fount meadows and the vents in the south of the borough. Now, several signs warn the underground fire: unstable ground, dangerous levels of carbon monoxide. Also, there's been some additional smoke and steam that can be seen coming from the abandoned portions of Pennsylvania Route 61. Now, the current route was formerly a detour from the damaged portion and during the repairs and became a permanent route in 1993. So, amounts of dirt were placed on both ends of the former route, effectively blocking the road, and pedestrian traffic is still possible due to a small opening about 2 feet wide on the north side of the road. Now, the underground fire is still burning, and in 2006, it was reported that it was expected to do so for another 250 years. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania did not renew the location contract by the end of 2005. So the last remaining house on Locust Avenue was demolished in September 2007. Now, this house is notable for a period for the 5 chimney-like support that it had and everything. Now residents John Karmaniski and John Locust Jr. were also evicted in May and July 2009, respectively. In May 2009, the remaining residents mounted another legal effort to reverse the eminent domain claim. Like, get out, people. Seriously. It's dangerous for y'all to live there. Hmm. Now, in April 2020, amidst the early part of the COVID-19 pandemic, the property's current owners made the decision to cover over the graffiti on the highway section of Old Route 9, and several mounds of dirt were laid in the area, ending a decades-long fascination with the desolate stretch of the road. Now, and as mentioned earlier, Silent Hill is said to be inspired by this town, but that's just rumor, so we don't know that for sure. But what do y'all think? Um, do y'all have, if you've been there, I am curious, let me know what you think. If I'm just curious on that one. But join me next time as we talk about the legend of Dungeon Rock Cave. Y'all have a great day.